Hello, this is WCCX, Waukesha 104.5 FM, and this is D&D with B&D, saying a lot to nobody. By the way, Brad, that's totally your own music, correct?
Yeah, I wrote that.
Good. We won't get sued then. That's a good thing.
Yeah, no, it's just literally thirds. It's
I
really
realize
simple.
every time we do this that I never have my microphone, not my microphone, my headphones on.
Oh.
You also, by the way, have 3 mics on. I don't know if you intended to do that.
Just calm down. I'm making sure we have the right ones on.
There you go. So my name is Drew Sherrod. I'm a religious studies major at Carroll University. And I am here with my friend...
Brad Weller. I forgot my own name for a second there. I am a double major in music and theater with a minor in arts management. I'm just derping around in all of the performing arts all the time.
I have a theater minor too. Forgot that. But yeah, we are... our podcast is talking about Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games. So if you are new to this podcast, you probably just turned off the radio. Today, we are going to get right down into it. We'll give a brief explanation of what we've talked about before, our first day. But first of all, we will be sending these out probably over winter break. We are recording all of
for
these.
Like a YouTube.
And we will give you information about the YouTube channel when that becomes available to anyone who wants to go back and listen to shows again. But for now... our previous shows were talking about D&D in general and how it's helpful to society and to people. Then our second show was talking... We are doing our first couple shows kind of for people who are new to D&D and building a character. Our second show was talking about the ability scores that are important to all characters, which are strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, and charisma. And also the skills that get affected by those. And then our third show, we talked about the different classes, which was a lot. So this is going to be a lot, too.
How to survive in a fantasy magical world.
Right. Today we are talking about the races, and we will be focusing on 5e races today, though 5e pretty much covers all of the races from beforehand that just kind of get lumped together now for 5e because they didn't really discard a lot. I guess they discarded some races from 4e, which I actually will say I dislike that because there are actually some pretty cool races in 4e. Pathfinder as well, they don't have all of the races from there. But we're mostly talking about 5e because it does encompass pretty much all of the 3.5 main races anyways. But yeah, we're just going to get right into it and talk about them one by one because there's a lot. So we're not give any more of an introduction. So our first race is a hard to pronounce race. It is called the Aarakocra. That's how I pronounce it. It's A-A-R, 2 A's and then an R, A-K-O-C-R-A.
Hey, Drew, you want to notice what I just realized?
What?
All of the races actually have something. Give me a second.
All of the races have what?
There is a pronunciation guide somewhere. Let me.
Well, that's true, but I know I'm pretty sure it's Aarakocra. People butcher names a lot that I don't understand why they butcher.
Aarakocra.
Yeah, Aarakocra.
You got it.
It's pretty good.
I butcher.
So the Aarakocra is essentially all of the mythological races here are like slightly changed humanoids, obviously, because. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to wield like swords and stuff that would be usually inherent in a role-playing game. So the Aarakocra, yes, Brad. Yes, Brad.
Basically, all these humanoids have 2 arms and 2 legs, with one exception.
Yeah. Yes, one exception. You're correct. The Aarakocra is a bird person. Essentially, they have 2 arms, 2 legs. I think their wings are separate from their arms. Correct? Mm-hmm. I don't remember quite. Aarakocra were introduced in very early D&D, before 3.5. I think maybe in Dark Sun campaigns. I don't know. I know 3 Kreen was, but not the Aarakocra, which there's no 3 Kreen in here, but that's okay. But Aarakocra are bird people. And they come from the plane of air, which is just essentially an entire world that is all air. Like there are small islands and stuff that exist within it, but it's like the Aarakocra have kingdoms within the plane of air, in that realm. And the Aarakocra came to the material plane, which is the basic world of our D&D. I guess. Yeah, fantasy D&D. Is there a name for the world in 5e?
They use Faerun a lot.
Okay, Faerun.
But
I know that it's Golarion in Pathfinder. I don't know if it has. I think it's Faerun still in 3.5 as well.
Faerun might just be the most popular continent.
Right.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, but anyway, that's where they come from, is the plane of air. And because they come from a plane of air, they are a little bit enigmatic and different from the people of the usual realms in D&D, and keep to themselves a lot. They seek kind of peace away from people up in the air in their kingdoms. The only thing that really draws them down to the ground level is essentially they are like kind of an honorable people that fight creatures of elemental earth that are evil, because that exists in this world. This is hard to explain without having the context of the world design, but like there's elemental powers that come about because there's an evil version of everything in the world of D&D. So no.
You mean
there's evil trees, evil plants, evil earth.
A common theme of good versus evil in a fantasy heroic kind of game?
No. It's non-existent in D&D, Brad.
Oh, good and hero aren't good and evil.
There's no things? No. You just kind of do taxes in the game. And like live life, you know.
Okay.
No, just kidding. So Aarakocra, that's basically an explanation of Aarakocra. The second race we have these in alphabetical order. They're a little complicated at first because we did that.
100%.
But it just made it easier for me to organize this. The second race we have are the Aasimar. And the Aasimar are essentially angel people. They were born from an angel and a human a long time ago, and were meant to be the herald of the different gods of D&D. Oftentimes they're mistaken as humans because they usually are just human looking with like slightly more vivid hair colors, like they have like silver hair and golden eyes and stuff, but they don't have wings most of the time. They can bring their wings out sort of at times with an ability, but they usually don't have their wings visible.
And typically they aren't obviously so angelic because people will come and kill them.
Yeah, they aren't godly creatures. They're races that players can play in the world, so they're just as mortal as everything else in the world. Also, they can't fly with their wings either. They just use the wings in certain instances.
1/3 of them can.
Oh, they can? I didn't read that one. I didn't, and I just read 2 of them, so that must have been the one I didn't read. There are abilities and stuff attached to all of the races. We won't be talking about those today, because it's just going to take and eat up way too much time.
So I used numbers this time, and there are 29 races, so we're trying to go through this fast.
Yes, exactly.
Don't want to be
Our next race is the Bugbear. And the way I describe Bugbear are nightmare people. So Bugbear are one of many types of goblinoid creatures in the world. They're essentially just huge, hulking individuals. They look like Wolverine, kind of. I compare them to Wolverine. At least all the art depictions I've seen of them is they look like a huge, bestial Wolverine. From X-Men, of course. Not an actual Wolverine.
No. Those are
because they have like these huge mutton chops, sort of. Not mutton chops. Sideburns that like go like wildly askew from their face. And have big teeth. They don't have the claws out of their knuckles, but they do have claws on the front of their hands. So,
And they're vicious and sneaky.
The
and
bugbears are a more evil-leaning race. They don't have to be evil. You can make any of the races any alignment you choose to, and I would encourage you to do so because honestly, in real life situations, it doesn't make sense that a race would be all evil or all chaotic or all lawful or anything like that.
Yeah, just a lot of them are.
In previous editions of D&D, they kind of made you have to make certain creatures a certain evil or good alignment, and that just doesn't make sense to how real life works. So the bugbear, usually though, in their own individual communities, they're a cult. They have a weird culture based around like inspiring fear in other people. They're a hunter race that hunts people at night and kind of like bully others into doing their work. Something I read in 5e, which I don't think is true in other editions, which is really interesting about
they're just really brutal and sneaky.
Is that they don't do anything else but hunt people. Like, they make other people they, like, enslave people and make other people do all the work for them, aside from hunting.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I don't think that would work.
They work with goblinoids.
I mean, like, as a society, that wouldn't work.
They aren't their own society.
What?
They aren't their own society.
What, bugbears? Oh, yeah, no, like if they enslave goblins and orcs and stuff?
No, they don't enslave them. They have a complicated relationship.
I suppose. I'm clicking the pen again, Brad. I'm taking it away from myself.
I'm taking the pen away from you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Next, boys.
Bugbears are pretty cool. I recently used them in a 3.5 game, and they're fun to play with.
You want to know what else is cool?
Yeah.
Having 4 legs.
Yeah. So this is the one that actually has 4 legs instead of 2. Centaur. I take it back. Triton's fine. I think my least favorite race is Centaur.
Really?
I don't know. I don't know.
Centaur,
it kind of breaks it a bit.
Human.
It kind of breaks the idea of a player character for me a bit. In bounds of what you can do for a player character. Yeah. So centaurs are, obviously, if you know anything about mythology, they're people with like a human torso upwards and a horse body downwards. So they have a horse body leading up to the neck of the horse, and then from the neck of the horse sprouts a human torso and arms and such. Horse centaurs in this world are very natural race. They desire a freedom of travel, is what I kind of got from their reading about them. Sure. Is they just want to be nomadic and travel around the world without any barriers to stop them. And they have these large herding communities that travel from one place to place worshiping nature. And because this is a medieval world, there's a lot more open spaces, and there are a lot of races that worship nature. But I really like the fact that 5e did a pretty good job, and like D&D in general, does a pretty good job of having a lot of races that that center around nature, but they're all kind of different in a good way. Mm-hmm. Centaur is just the first one that we talk about. Then we have changelings. I almost feel like we're going too fast. I know we're not, because we have a long way to go, but geez. So why are you looking at your phone so much?
Because I have it pulled up.
Oh, I see. I understand now. That makes more sense. You want to talk about changelings? Because I know you wanted to talk about changelings.
Changelings, they can change their appearance. They look humanoid, can act humanoid, but they change their appearance on a whim, kind of. They can change their, whole persona depending on their emotions, and they are interesting folks.
Yeah, they have a weird... I don't know if this is true in earlier editions, but in 5e, they made it so changelings, base their entire ecology and personality around their ability to shift, so that they literally change shape to show different emotions. They change their face into other people they've changed their faces into in the past to show that their emotion is changing, which I think would be really helpful in a real life situation. I now know you're actually angry. Good to know. Thank you. No, I'm not angry. I mean, your face says you are, though. So
also, if a changeling dies and they have no successors or someone to take over the business, another changeling can just take their appearance.
Wow.
Yeah, it happens.
That's an interesting thing to think about, yeah.
No, I've read it, and I think it's fun.
Yeah, they're interesting. They don't have their own culture really, so they often hide amongst humans and other races.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little unclear to me as to whether they can change just their face or their whole body as a race.
They can even change their gender.
Okay, good to know. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, I know they can in earlier editions, but I didn't know if that was true in 5e.
Yep.
Because all this stuff sometimes changes between editions and stuff. And like in my world, I know I have differences for each race as well.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, Brad, we forgot to mention at the top of this that we shouldn't be talking about all these races because the only two races that matter are Kenkus and Tortles.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll get to them soon.
We will, but they are the only ones that honestly matter.
Like, be a Kenku or Tortle. That's all I'm going to tell you. That's the only race you should be. Kenkus are kind of hard. For a role-playing aspect, but also fun. But anyway, we'll get to those later. Dragonborn. So, a lot of people get so hype over Dragonborn. It's essentially just like humanoid dragon people. And they were born from dragons a long time ago at some point. They hatched from dragon eggs, and no one really knows how that happened.
That's weird.
But they were a whole new race and became an intelligent, sentient, like humanoid race. They often serve dragonkind. They are honorable and clan-oriented. I'm not really a huge fan of Dragonborn. I really love Irinaga, which are my kind of version in my own game, because I've given them more of a culture, but I don't feel like there's much of a culture built around Dragonborn, honestly.
I like kobolds better.
Yeah, I can agree with you there. Like, Dragonborn are essentially like, we wanted a good, like, lizard race.
They're kind of dragons. They're part dragons.
They're part dragons. And they can breathe some fire or acid sometimes. Yeah. Like, that's so much...
Their culture isn't really made.
Power. Their culture is just they worship the dragons. And that's it. They help the dragons. Right. They don't really have a culture of their own that I could find or understand.
You want to know who really has a culture, though?
Dwarves.
Dwarves
are amazing. Everybody hates on dwarves. Really? I just want to take a moment here. I love dwarves. Reed doesn't like dwarves or doesn't want to play Annie, and I think that's the biggest flaw in our friendship right there. Is that they don't like dwarves. I don't know if they don't like dwarves. They've just never had any inclination of playing them and have said so before. But I love dwarves so much. Like, there's so many different iterations of dwarves as well. I'm not hugely into some of this stuff that D&D actually gives dwarves, because dwarves in D&D, they make them lawful good and they kind of make them like staunch assholes, whereas I make them a little more. They're still kind of assholes and they're kind of staunch, but they're joyous. They're happy people. Whereas at least in 3.5, dwarves were very gruff and like just what's the word? Like just arrogant, I guess, and didn't really trust people, which is still kind of true in 5e that they don't trust people. A little
bit, but they're a lot more fun in 5e.
Yeah, but they have these radiant empires of treasure. I guess I'm not going to explain dwarves because you should kind of know what a dwarf is. It's a stout person with a beard. They often live in caves and have huge empires of treasure are in the caves. And that's true in D&D. They are also like long-time grudge holders. That was something that I attached onto in the reading I did for 5e dwarves, is because they live so long, which in comparison to some races in D&D, they say that they live long, but they really they're in the middle. But they have like long-term grudges that they hold against people. They are loyal, but they're also very stubborn. Mm-hmm. They have strong devotions to some subject matter. Those subject matters usually revolve around their gods. Oftentimes, they're one god. I think 5e has one Dwarven god that I can't remember. I know in 3.5 it's Moradin. They are very devoted to gold. You see that little essence of like greed in dwarves sometimes, where they just are treasure hunters or something, or they have a devotion to their clan or people that they're a part of.
And dwarves was one of the classic ones.
Yeah, dwarves has been around since the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was one of the first edition classes.
Hey.
Still
Yeah.
is weird to me.
You want to know what was one of the strongest first edition classes?
What?
The elf.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, elves. I don't want to leave dwarves because I love them so much.
Dwarves
and
are
elves, don't get me wrong. I love elves. I love elves a lot. They're overrated. Like, so many people are into elves. Like, it's just like, I don't want to hear about elves anymore. Like, and elves in D&D are, I think, in some ways, better than elves as seen in media and, like, Lord of the Rings and stuff. Because they're chaotic.
100%.
They're supposed to be chaotic in D&D. They're like fairy people, essentially. They came from the Feywild or something a long time ago. The wording of it is enigmatic through different editions. In 3.5, there is no Feywild, so I don't remember where it says they come from. Yeah, I added that in our games. But they treat everyone with like a lot of experience because they live a long time. So they treat everyone with kind of weariness. They're not quick to jump into things, which is, it says that a little askew from the idea of being chaotic.
Yeah.
But also the part that is chaotic about them is they treat everything as if it's just like, whatever, you know. I've been living for 700 years. This little thing, like losing this job or whatever, I've got 400 years to get another one. Like, whatever. Like, to a lot of races or people in general in this world, that's a big deal sometimes. But like to an elf, it's like, I'll just go tend some trees and farm for a while, for like 50 years. And because of their long experiences, they are kind of slow to find forge friendships with people. And they're even also, it says, slow to find a foe as well. They're slow to anger to the level of considering someone a foe. But it also says they're also slow to lose a friend and lose a foe, essentially. Like, once you've made a friend with them, it's for life. And once you've made a foe with them, they're gonna wreck you. No.
That's for sure.
And they are just... this is a problem with most like media I see of elves, and like D&D a little bit too, is they're just kind of perfect at everything. Like, they're great artists. They're great at all types of artistry, even if they don't often do it. Like, the dwarves, it even says, as in a mention of the dwarves, like, they're really good forgers when they put their minds to it. They rarely do it, but elves are good forgers when they put their minds to it. And it's just like, what are they not good at? Like, I want to see something they are not good at.
That's fair.
It annoys me a little bit, I guess. I don't know why I'm getting so angry, because I usually don't like feel this way about elves when people play elves, but I probably would have a fit if I had a whole party of elves, because it's just like, play something else. There's so many cool races that aren't just people with knife ears.
But they do mental exercises instead of sleep through.
Yeah, that's a weird thing.
They don't need sleep.
The next race we have, we kind of combined two here, is the Tiefling and the Feral Tiefling. Because I don't know why they didn't just give us like a subclass, sub-race to Tiefling for the Feral Tiefling.
You're right.
Yeah, the Tiefling is essentially you know, we talked about the Asama, which are angel people. Tiefling is the opposite spectrum. They are the fiend people. They come from when a demon or a devil mates with a human, and then a Tiefling comes out of that. And because of that, obviously, they are very misliked in the world of D&D, and people are very mistrusting of them most of the time. Yeah, they don't like them. It's essentially akin to, like, probably in, like, 5e's world at least, the most racism of all is done towards Tieflings, I think. from what I've seen of 5e.
That and goblinoids.
That's fair.
Yeah,
that's fair.
Are,
but goblinoids, it's a little harder because goblinoids don't often, unless you're in like a small town or like a criminal town, they often aren't in towns. Like tieflings can be found wherever.
Mm-hmm.
Goblins, it's a rare find to find a goblin in a civilized area. At least in 5e's world. In my world, you can find anything anywhere because I believe they should be able to go anywhere. But because goblins are great, and that's the third Erd race that I would add on to: Kankus, Torals, and goblins. Those are the only races you should really choose. But anyway, tieflings, to get into them, they're untrusting, and they're kind of split into two different categories because there's the regular tiefling, which comes from like devils, from what I understand, are more like sophisticated fiends, and they often are more cunning creatures that take like sorcerer classes and wizard classes. And then there's the feral tiefling, which comes from the abyssal or the demon kind of fiends, which are more wild, destructive, and they take more like barbarian, I guess, and like fighter, rogue. And like, yeah, I guess rogue too. I mean, often and more rogue. Like, here's the thing: is like the actual stat boost would say rogue, but what you read in the lore, you would think barbarian or fighter. In my opinion, which like I can see that would be a great barbarian is a dex-based barbarian that's a feral tiefling. That would be cool.
Ooh.
I kind of want to do that now. But then there's furbolg. I love furbolgs as well. Furbolgs are cool. They're like
it's nice, friendly
enigmatic giants. Where furbolgs come from. I guess they're supposed to be in earlier editions. They're supposed to be connected to giants, but that's kind of been taken over by Goliath now.
They are connected to giants, but these are like the friendlier kind.
Yeah, these are like furbolgs. Come from, I think, like they are an offshoot of the Fenseer, which is a Norse mythology giant sort of thing. But the furbolg, I think they might have furbolgs in Norse mythology too. I might be wrong. I don't remember honestly. But they're like a nature-loving giant people, and they only really desire like a peaceful existence within the forest. They're kind of hermits, which we get into another like hermit race later, but they're a different kind. They work as like shepherds of the land and of caretakers of the forest, essentially, and they rarely come into contact with civilized realms. Yeah. But I think the most interesting part about them is that they abhor greed to a like further level than I see other nature races hating it. Like, I can't remember what it said in the book, but like they feel like no one should take anything more than they need from nature, and to do so destroys the beauty. Like, if everything in the world would be perfect, they think, essentially, if everybody just got rid of greed, is essentially how I read it in context.
Yeah. They don't want people taking more than they should.
Yeah. And so that usually they don't have a form of economy or anything like that, from what I could tell.
Cities aren't typically
they might
about.
trade. They might trade.
Not really. What I've been reading is they're rarely ever noticed.
Yeah, I mean, they don't. I mean, like, trade as needed amongst themselves, probably.
Yeah.
Because they really only live in, like, small hamlets by themselves away from society. And we are back. Next up, we have the gnome, which gnome has been around since very early in D&D history. I don't think it was one of the original classes of first edition, but it was definitely around in second edition. Might have been introduced at some point in first edition. But the gnomes are, you think like garden gnomes when you hear gnomes, but they're like,
I mean, they can be that.
They're small people who often have vibrant personalities. They're an inventor sort of people. They work hard, party hard is the way I would describe gnomes, is they are very invested in all the crafts they do. And if you want like an element of like technology in your world, it's usually going to come from gnomes building something or tinkering on something in the world.
Well,
And they also party hard. You see a lot of gnome bards and heavy drinkers and stuff like that. They party a lot. What were you going to say, Brad?
the more tinkering gnomes are more rock gnomes, while there are more simplistic, nature-loving gnomes
Right.
that are different.
Yeah, I'm not too into. I didn't read much about the different subtypes of things because I just didn't have time for this, and I don't really know as much about 5e as you do. I just read these all like 2 days ago, I think, and made a list for this today. They're also huge jokesters and pranksters, and that has been around for a while in gnomes. Though I didn't know much about it when I first played D&D, and in 3.5 that they were jokesters and pranksters, and I always kind of thought the gnomes were like one of the worst races. I kind of like them now. I would never put them into my world, but because their place is filled, their place and Halfling's place is kind of dually filled by the light sprites. But yeah, they're pretty cool.
I have something to touch about gnomes, but I think I want to get to it later.
Why is that?
Because they have a very hate relationship with someone else.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Yeah, anyway. Then there's the goblins, and I love goblins. Goblins are great. They're small little green people who are goblinoids, obviously. And oftentimes they are depicted as evil doers. But they are low level, so they're usually used for low level parties to fight often, which I hate how they're often used to fight low level parties. Unless you're going to do them cleverly, save them for later, actually. You can make some really interesting encounters with goblins later on, or better yet, social encounters with goblins, because I love goblins and I don't think they should be evil all the time. They are oftentimes used as like toadies of other goblinoid races as well, or really any villains. They're used as minions oftentimes. But they have part of the reason that they're so greedy and like hate fueled towards the civilized races is because they have such short lives and they just want to get as much as they can before they die. And none of the races treat them with any sort of respect. So we have to take this stuff because we don't have any other choice. And they also, an interesting factoid about them that I found in the descriptions of them, which is kind of interesting to me because it speaks. There's interesting lore about goblins and dogs, goblins versus dogs and horses in all of the different editions. In 5e, they made it so like rats are the equivalent of dogs for goblins, and wolves are the equivalent of horses for goblins, which I found really interesting. Goblins and wolves have had a history in 3.5. In 5e, there's a lot of lore about goblins hating dogs and horses. Or not 5e. In Pathfinder, there's a lot of lore about goblins hating dogs and horses, and I just like that that's a common theme that always comes up about dogs and horses versus goblins, because it's not something you typically think about, but if you actually read that part, you can use that to make a lot of different interesting stories and complexities to their culture, and also how you incorporate them in a game of like maybe the goblins, they're just attacking the town because they want to kill all the horses. Because like in Pathfinder, they really fucking hate horses and dogs. And man, that was a slip. Is one of those slips I was talking about.
Goblins are lit.
Good thing it's after 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Then you have the Goliath, and this is what I was talking about before when I said the race that's filled by coming from giants. The Goliaths came from giants. And they're essentially a people that live high on mountains, kind of away from society. I'm talking way away from the mic right now. Sorry. Way on top of mountains, far away from society. And their whole culture is based around survival of the fittest. Like, they have a huge compulsion to compete with each other. Like I said, they live high in the mountains where everything is sparse and it's hard to find a way to survive, food to eat, and everything. But like an interesting part of them is they view everyone as equal. They rarely have like a true leader, and they actually, when they are in other cultures, they find that weird about other cultures. Is like, why is this guy king? He's not the strongest. You could easily kill him and take over, and like, this doesn't make any sense. You should just have an equal playing field where everyone survives. So they have an equal playing field between all of them, but that comes with the expectation that you kind of fend for yourself. Like, and so they don't understand societies because of that. Really, any sort of hierarchical civilization. They're like wild socialists in a way.
Talking about that a day after voting.
Sure, I have nothing to lose. They're like the like, I don't know, like they're kind of
anarchists.
No, I can't compare them to anything in real life because there's not really a good. I don't know. I mean, there are good comparisons, but like, I feel like I'd be pointing a finger that I don't really know about too much. So,
but you want to know who makes great communities?
Yeah,
halflings.
Yeah, I love your transitions. Halflings.
Halflings. They are such homely bodies.
Halflings are my favorite race.
They are
in base 3.5 and base 5e.
They are great.
I love halflings so much. Halflings often are like rogues because they're like small. Halflings are hobbits in Lord of the Rings. They're a little different than hobbits. They have a very homely personality most of the time, in that they always want to have some sort of community that they can come back to, and they're often very cheery and very kind to everyone. And so they don't really make huge kingdoms or great monuments that people look at. But when they are on their own, man, they're great. They often go out to adventure. Oftentimes, this is a really cool thing about 5e, and this is true in earlier editions, partially, but they often go out to travel in the world just because they want to have like a community. It reminds me, have you ever seen Saving Private Ryan, Brad?
I have not. Sadly.
There's this guy in Saving Private Ryan that is in the army and is with the team that goes to save Private Ryan, who's like writing a book about the band of brothers, and like he's obviously has to be drafted in the war, but he's also just has this like idyllic view of like the team he's going to be a part of, and like wants a community amongst the team members, which I would argue they kind of get, but then they mostly die. But spoilers for Saving Private Ryan. It's a good movie. You should go watch it. But like he kind of it's that reminds me of Halfling, except if the Halfling chose to be part of the army because they wanted to be part of a band of brothers, like they wanted to be a part of the community,
to make some
like,
friends.
and that often gets sometimes you can role play a character that gets them in trouble, and they realize, oh crap, this is like actually not a great living. Like people are dying all the time, and there's blood everywhere. And there's also some halflings that have this wanderlust feel. I know that in earlier editions there was the Kender race, which is very well portrayed in Tasselhoff Burfoot in the Dragonlance books. Yeah, the Kenders are a weird subclass of halflings in earlier editions that like have to get out of the community for at least a time. I don't remember if they even come back, but like all of the community, everybody always leaves. Like all the youngsters at a certain age just leave to go adventure or whatever. And they have no fear. That's an interesting thing about Kenders in earlier editions. They can't be affected by fear, ever.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Then there's hobgoblins. Hobgoblins are pretty cool.
Oh, I
like
love them.
in 5e, at least, to me.
They're basically like the same size as humans. They just have like red skin, and
Yeah, they are warlords. They're another goblinoid race, but they're like a warrior race. They have a strict hierarchy. They're usually lawful evil, and they go out and wage wars against other people for
Glory.
Glory, essentially. Yeah, the glory is a big part of them. But something interesting about them is they wage these wars, but they still have this weird code of honor. I didn't do the code of honor because it would take too long to explain. But they have this weird code of honor. So they do have a structure to their military, and they have this hierarchy that is, interestingly, not separated by kind or sex. They have no like racism or anything within their military units. It's just like who's best, and that's who gets to the top. Is who's best. Like you can be female, you can be a male. A lot of cultures, obviously, in 5e and like medieval times, don't necessarily have that, but they don't really care about that. The only thing they care about is you fight, and also you don't run away. Cowardice is considered worse than death to the hobgoblins. But because of their like strict view of war, and like that's the only thing in the world, they don't really care about art or trading or any other sort of experience. They do, interestingly, have very good manners with those they trade with and have relationships with. It's just if they expect that same respect back, and if you don't respect them, they will destroy you.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of like Genghis Khan was very much like he would send people in and be like, hey, if you switch to our religion, if you join us, we'll let you worship your gods and whatever. We'll let you be your own people as long as you join us. But if you don't join us, we'll wipe you out. And like he did just that. He allowed them to have their own culture, or he wiped you out if you said no. Then you have the humans. So humans are your average race, and you can be a human if you want to. If you want to be boring, that's an option to you. No, there are actually real reasons to be a human sometimes. Sometimes, lore-wise, it just makes sense for your character. Yeah. And they are versatile, I guess. They can do most classes and everything. But yeah, I don't have anything else to say about humans because there's a lot of different cultures that they've made for humans that I didn't think were needed.
They're like the most exploration-y, I feel.
I guess, yeah. They're like, I kind of compare them to rats in like most D&D worlds because they're everywhere. Like you can't go anywhere without seeing a human. So they incorporate themselves into every style of life.
So
then you have
past the boring boy, and let's talk about the best.
Let's talk about best boy, Kenku.
Oh my god.
So Kenku are essentially just small crow people. Like, they look like crows. They don't really have wings. They have some feathers on their arms. But there's a reason they don't have wings. It's because a long time ago in their history, they stole something from their god. And because of that, they were cursed to have no ability to fly, ever.
Lost their own voice.
And lose their own voice. And it's interesting in D&D because even, like, there are spells that allow you to speak other creatures' languages. But even that you can't use on a Kenku. You can't understand, make them be able to speak in any way, shape, or form. What's interesting also about them, though, is though they lost their voice, they can kind of mimic other individuals. They can make bird noises, but they can also mimic other people's voices to try and have a conversation with people. They just can't have, like, their own individual thoughts. And apparently, which I didn't know this, and I might have to change some things for my new boy coming up, they also need to see writing as well. Like, they can't have individual thoughts. They can't create things themselves and stuff. They can't
come up with anything on their own.
Right. Volition. I don't really like that part. I hope that we kind of tweak that a bit for mine.
That can help you.
But, like, and because of that, all they're left to do is continuously try to find out how to break their curse, and they have been for centuries. And they often lead to lives of crime because of that, because they're so broken down and, like, don't have anything else to do because they can't create things. They can't create civilization unless they're copying someone else's or anything like that. They can't create art or sell anything or do anything if they're not copying someone else. And for that reason, they often serve well as, like, minions to, like, villains, as well as that, because as they can just obey their master's commands, but also because they can't really say anything if they get caught, which we experienced in a game of yours recently, where we caught a Kenku who was fighting for the guy, and it was like it would just repeat stuff that he said that was not really helpful to us. Like, you can't torture anything out of them because they have nothing to say, really, unless you're clever about it.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have kobolds. And there's a lot of different lizard people in D&D. There's a lot. There's in my world, too. There's a lot of different lizard people. But the kobolds are tiny lizard people. They're like 3 feet tall. They live in caves, and they shy away from direct conflict. Oftentimes, they are evil. Lawful evil. They have a hierarchy and a clan structure to them. And they also have a very strict devotion to evil dragons. They worship evil dragons in a better way, I feel like, than Dragonborn.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're
100%.
a very more cultic worship of dragons because they only worship the evil ones.
Also, kobolds are very weak, and they know this.
Yes.
So they work together and make plans so much better.
It's so much fun to have a wave of kobolds come at you and be able to destroy them. That's cool in D&D to, like, test your party and see, like, how far you've come. You can destroy all these guys very easily. But, like, when you actually use... And I think you can do that easily enough by having the kobolds not be prepared and have it be in a lore situation. But it's also very interesting to me to make kobolds an actual threat by using their intelligence against a party and having them set traps and stuff, which I did in your guys' party very recently, is you guys thought they were running away from you, but really one of them went up and pushed a boulder down on one of the other players and stuff like that. Is they're excellent trap makers, and they're also excellent tunnel makers, so they know where to hit the walls to make the entire tunnel collapse and kill your entire party. Like, they are incredibly intelligent, and they are also very focused on tricks and, like, traps and pranks, which makes them prime candidates to be enemies
of gnomes.
Yeah, they
absolutely hate each other.
Yeah, gnomes and kobolds often live underground together, and they're kind of arch rivals in that way. All races kind of have, all the main races kind of have a sort of arch rival. I guess halflings don't, really. But a lot of them have their arch rival race, and kobolds is the arch rival to gnomes.
Know why kobolds and gnomes hate each other?
Why?
Basically, the gnome's god trapped the kobold's god in, like, some endless maze or something, and the kobolds are, in life, they're just trying to find items to help free their god.
Oh, that's kind of sad.
Yeah.
Also, I don't believe that. Really? The kobold god is trapped in a maze? He should be able to get out of it. He's very intelligent.
Trapped somewhere by a gnome god.
Alright.
It's complicated.
Then we have lizard folk. So, another lizard people. But these are, like, the true lizard people.
I like
they live in swamps. And I like 5e's lore of them. They have very limited emotional output. They have a very different processing of emotions. Like, their 3 primary emotions are aggression, fear, and pleasure. And they process that in a very different way than we do. Like, they don't actually think, oh, someone's beating me right now, I'm actually afraid. It's more of a survival instinct. They have much more of an animalistic sort of instinct into it than a human would. They're just like, oh, I need to get away now. They're very calm about it. They know what they need to do. They don't have this sense of, like, they can't really be, I mean, technically by the rules of the game and, like, rules of spells and stuff, they can be frozen in fear by some spells and stuff, but, like, from what you read about their lore, it doesn't make sense for them to be, like, ever frozen by this thought of fear or anything like that. And, like, aggression as well. They're aggressive to other races, but that's not really anger. They don't really hate other races. That is just what they do to survive. They have a very cold, calculative understanding of the world around them. They're very focused on survival. But they also are very kind of they extend that survival to other individuals sometimes, and that they have a strong hatchling bond to individuals, and they see humans often in times as without a community, humans are worthless. They can't survive anywhere, and they will sometimes even protect humans if they can. More often, and they will protect their own young and stuff. But they essentially can view humans sometimes as young, that need to be protected.
Yeah. And we're back.
We are back. Once again, this is WCCX Waukesha 104.5 FM. And we are continuing and talking about our races for D&D. Now we have the Loxodon, which you said is your least favorite race of the batch we have today. They're essentially elephant people. They're just giant hulking elephants that walk around civilizations and are oftentimes very peaceful and don't really do a lot unless provoked. And they are also good craftsmen of stone. And they have this belief that all things are part of a community. And like if they're part of an organization, they have to give it their all, essentially. There's not really a lot I could find about Loxodons. Yeah. There's very little about them.
They're based in Magic the Gathering lore.
Right. We should move on anyway to orcs and half-orcs.
Love them.
Orcs are pretty cool. Orcs, I think, still get kind of a bad rap in 5e. It's the only goblinoid race that, well, actually bugbears as well, but the only goblinoid race that I still feel like are kind of pigeonholed into being evil. Half-orcs get a better deal, but orcs are essentially like these brutish people who hate civilization. They have this intense hatred of like true civilized races, which is why they're kind of pigeonholed into being evil. And they work as raiders and reavers around the area. But they also have this constant fear of their gods that is ingrained in their culture. I don't really like orcs much in 5e because they're still fairly brutish, animalistic creatures. Which, I mean, you can have that without making it in their entire races that way. And obviously, you can make an orc whatever you want it to be, but it's definitely more pigeonholed.
Did you know that if you had an orc,
than hobgoblins and goblins?
If you had an orc and raised them in normal society in D&D standards, he would not be evil at all. They have no genetic predisposition to be.
Well, that should be true of all races. That doesn't make any sense for it to be untrue of other races. Like, I don't believe in real life of any true evil, and I don't believe in it in D&D either. I think it menializes the complexities you can have in a game as well. But anyway, moving on, we have the shifters, which I wasn't originally going to put shifters into this one because I had a rule that we weren't going to do races that were just slightly altered humans from a different curse or whatever. But I thought shifters was its own thing enough that I could put it above the Kalashtar and the Simic hybrid, which we are not talking about today. The shifters are essentially werewolf people. They got a werewolf curse a long time ago and kind of formed their own race and culture. They're very wild people and very willing to go with whatever life throws at them, essentially. They're very willing to change their outlook on life. And to a point where it's well, farming didn't work out. They are very quick to be okay, let's go adventure now for a while. And they don't have nearly as long of lives as elves who can do that as well. They just are very willing to take what life throws at them and roll with it. That's as much as I could find about shifters for this show. Then we have the Tabaxi. I like the Tabaxi.
I love the Tabaxi.
They're much better than cat folk in Pathfinder.
Yeah.
In my opinion, because they have an interesting way of viewing the world. They're wanderers and interesting curiosity investigators, but they aren't thieves necessarily.
Oh no.
They they try and find artifacts because they are artifacts. Like they're not going to pick your coin purse. I mean, I might. Some might.
Totally.
Obviously, there are individuals in every race, but
Like,
they're more interested in like taking a treasure from a huge like Indiana Jones style pyramid than stealing someone's gold from a bank.
100%. All Tabaxi are obsessed with something.
Yeah,
they're trying to find like an ultimate question, some magic power, or
they go around telling stories, seeking artifacts, and spreading their wares. They're kind of similar to Khajiit in the Elder Scrolls series. A little different in that I think Khajiit would steal your purse without a second thought, or at least the general Khajiit would. Tabaxi really don't care about that, at least not as much as they care about specific like individual pieces that they're looking for. Yes. They're looking for a specific adventure, sort of.
Yeah. And you want to know another great race that
one of the best races?
Best races?
Yeah.
Turtles.
Turtles are turtle people, like on paper sounds awful. Like there are a lot of races in D&D that is just like, let's take an animal and make it a person. And it sucks. Like the Loxodon, you don't like the Loxodons. And there's also the GIF, which are hippo people that are very recent and are dumb. But I actually haven't read the lore, so to be fair, I should do that. But the turtles are great. The only thing that doesn't make sense about them is they apparently have a short lifespan, Brad tells me.
Yeah.
Which turtles have a super long lifespan, so that doesn't make sense. Turtles are essentially hermits, but also survivalists. They live in nature and kind of just live on their own and survive on their own.
Yes, and another thing about them is that they mate later in life. So what they do is they go out, have adventures on their own, and then come back and tell their children. They're great storytellers, as that is what they do at the end of their life, and whatever they have left is given off to their children. And I just love the idea of just this turtle going out on an adventure and in days of old coming back to its youth and sharing stories.
Yeah, they're a very peaceful race that rarely has anything to do with society and lives on their own most of their lives and then passes on their story essentially to their child to go on and live their own life, which I think is very cool.
Very sweet. And another kind of sea-based race is the Tritons, which are basically just sea people. They come from the sea. They are sea people. They are, if you imagine like the Little Mermaid,
they come from the plane of water, to be specific. But they came to the material plane because they saw that a lot of different evil water monsters, like krakens and Sahuagin, that's a creature name. The krakens and Sahuagins would come into the material plane and attack people. And because of that, they found it upon themselves, because they didn't really know much about the material plane, and if it had capabilities of defending itself, they took it upon themselves to essentially go into the seas of the material plane and protect the people of the material plane. And because of that, they have a very arrogant nature and think that the surface world kind of owes them for it, because they protected them from these sea monsters. And to be fair, they did help a lot in defending against these sea monsters. But the book is very clear in that their arrogance comes from a very strong sense of ignorance of what the surface world is capable of. They are a very good people in protecting people and are very good-hearted creatures, but they just have huge, like, haughty arrogance to them because of them. I said before that this was my least favorite race. I think I changed that at some point to Centaur. Yeah. I don't know. I didn't think we needed another haughty race like elves. Elves I like better than Tritons, though.
I actually like Tritons now that you told me more of their story.
Yeah. I mean, it's a cool story. I see it as an excuse to make a race that's uppity. I don't know. Yeah. Then the next one is Vedel Khan. Vedalken. Vedalken is the way I was pronouncing it before. And the Vedalken are like blue. They essentially just like look like blue humanoids. They're slightly taller than humans. I described them in my notes here as alien people.
Yeah.
And they're weird. I don't know if I like Vedalken either.
They're based off of Magic the Gathering as a couple things that share with Wizards of the Coast and yada yada. But these are very logic-based people. Just imagine Spock.
Yeah, they're kind of like Spock, but they focus more on ideas than they do on people. The difference between them and like Spock, for instance, if you know Star Trek stuff, is they don't. Well, actually, Spock does have more emotions than the typical Vulcan, but they don't. What makes them different than lizard folks as well is just because they don't show emotions doesn't mean they don't have them. They very much have them just as much as other humanoids, and humans often think because they don't show those emotions, they don't have them, which they're just good at hiding them because they seek this impossible perfection, which they understand in their lore is not possible to find perfection, but they still seek it in a weird way. I didn't really read too much about it because I was getting close to the end of researching them because we only have 2 more races here. Our next one is the Viational, and the Viational are yet another lizard person, but they're another cave lizard person, kind of like the kobolds. But they're medium-sized, so they're like human-sized. And where a lot of lizards get their sun, this was like the interesting tidbit I read at the beginning of the Ashinos thing. Most lizards get their life from the sun. They warm their cold blood from the sun, but the Ashino warm their blood from their zeal for life, essentially. They are incredibly robust in their emotional capacity. They have strong emotions about everything, and that makes them very destructive and wild in some cases. And that's about most of what I could find about them. There's a lot of lore you can incorporate about them being from the Underdark, which is essentially the cave systems below the D&D world. I know mine that I'm going to be bringing in has been tortured by mind flayers, which are an enemy in D&D. But like, yeah, they're kind of not. There's kind of not much lore on them as of now in D&D. I hope that they will expand on some of those at some point. I have a feeling they won't because they're just Unearthed Arcana, like, oh, it's a Magic the Gathering thing. It's cute. Let's throw this in.
That's Eberron.
But okay, gotcha.
Yeah, throw a friend on that one.
Good to know. But Viashino is in Magic the Gathering, isn't it?
What?
Pretty sure Viashino are in Magic the Gathering. Because I looked up Viashino and I got Magic the Gathering cards. So, anyway.
Let me just double check because I don't want to give people misinformation.
And our final race is the Warforged.
You are correct, Drew. They are.
Yeah. The Warforged have been around since at least 3.5. They are essentially robot people. They are made from wood and metal and were made to serve in this war that happened a long time ago. 5e calls it the Last War. I didn't really read into what the Last War was. I apologize. But since then, they have kind of gained emotions over time and created their own race, and they feel emotions and pain. But now that the war is over, and there's still wars going on, but they are trying to find a purpose that's not just for war at this point in their existence, and they haven't really formed a community as of yet, or kingdoms or anything like that in the world. They're just kind of trying to find a place in the world. Yeah, so that's all the 5e races. There are other 3.5 races. Like, I know there's one in Races of the Forest that's like a flying race that I don't remember the name of right now. Races of the Wilds book is what I mean to say.
But no, if you ever play a D&D game that's 5e, the races you can choose from should either be Kenku,
turtle, or goblin. Yeah, those are the only three
Those
races
are-
that matter.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Well,
We didn't just spend
You know,
an hour
you know.
and 8 minutes.
we should take the 10 minutes that we have. We should talk about our boy Ollie.
Oh,
No, because I don't
spoilers.
want other people who are playing in that game to know about him.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll talk about him some other time.
Maybe.
Hopefully. Maybe someday.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but we should talk about our next show. Next show will be our last show in the series of kind of helping players, for now at least.
It might not be next week, but the week after, or maybe 2 weeks
Right.
after.
Whatever we next do our show.
Yes.
The next showing will be more for the last show that we kind of do for new players, and then we'll kind of go into like DMing stuff and talk about DMing stuff, which will be a little more complicated because for us, like designing it.
Yeah. We have different approaches.
That's true, but I mean more like there's less of a set things that we need to talk about with like storytelling and stuff like that. But like next one, we are going to be going through the building of a character. I thought maybe we could build a character as well. That would be interesting to do as we do it.
Yeah.
And talk about the
Or
character.
we could bring
we build.
dice, just make some
Yeah,
fancy
but
models.
like we'll build a 5e character, but I will explain how to do it in 3.5 as well for those that want to make a 3.5 character, and you should. 3.5 is better. But that is what we are going to be talking about next time. It is the culmination of everything we've talked about before, and we will go over some of that stuff again next time. But yeah, we will see you then.
Anyways,
Have a great Wednesday.
this has been D&D.
Oh, this has been and D&D with B&D, saying a lot to nobody, and it's also WCCX Waukesha 104.5 FM.